Regret has a way of visiting us when the noise of life has quieted down. For many, it arrives in the later years when work no longer dictates each day and children have grown into their own lives. At 65, Alina knew this feeling well. She had lived a life full of responsibilities, raising children, holding a steady job, paying bills on time. But when she looked back, she realized there were moments she had missed, dreams she had postponed, and words she had left unsaid. Alina's days were comfortable enough. She had a cozy house, a small pension, and occasional visits from her daughter and two grandchildren. Yet at night, when she sat by the window and looked at the stars, a quiet ache would settle in her chest. She remembered the guitar that had gathered dust in her closet, the places she had always wanted to see but never visited, and the book of poetry she once dreamed of writing but never began. One day, she used to say, but somehow one day had always been pushed to tomorrow, and tomorrow slipped into years. Her regrets were not dramatic tragedies but a collection of small, consistent postponements. She regretted not traveling with her late husband when they were younger because they thought they needed to save more first. She regretted not learning to paint when her friend invited her to join an art class because she felt she was too busy with work. She regretted not saying, "I love you" more often, assuming her loved ones simply knew. Those missed chances had built up into a quiet weight she carried into her older age. One autumn afternoon, Alina received a letter from an old friend, Margaret, whom she hadn't spoken to in decades. The letter was simple, written in shaky handwriting. "I don't know how much time I have left, but I want to spend it doing the things I always wanted to do. Would you join me?" Something about those words struck Alina like a bell. Here was someone who understood, someone who was choosing action over regret. Without overthinking, Alina picked up the phone and called Margaret. The sound of her friend's voice, aged but still familiar, felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. They talked for hours, laughing, reminiscing, and sharing the heaviness of what they wished they had done differently. Soon after, they made a pact. Every month they would do something, big or small, that their younger selves had once longed for but never dared. Their first adventure was simple. Alina dusted off her old guitar, and Margaret brought a notebook of poems she had written but never shared. They spent an afternoon on Margaret's porch, Alina strumming clumsy chords, Margaret reading her poems aloud, both women rediscovering parts of themselves they had buried under decades of duty. The following month, they went to a local art class for beginners. Alina dipped her brush into paint for the first time in years, and though her strokes were uneven, the colors filled her with joy. She realized the point was not to become great but to express what she had kept silent inside her heart. Margaret encouraged her, and Alina in turn reminded Margaret to keep writing. They became each other's accountability partners in living the life they once postponed. As the months passed, Alina noticed something changing inside her. Regret still knocked at her door occasionally, whispering reminders of lost time, but she no longer let it weigh her down. Instead, she welcomed it as a teacher. Regret had taught her the cost of waiting too long, and it pushed her to embrace the time she had left with urgency and gratitude. Alina also began sharing these lessons with her grandchildren. One afternoon, as she watched her granddaughter hesitate to audition for a school play, Alina leaned in and said, "Darling, I spent too much of my life waiting for the perfect moment. Don't do that. If you want something, go for it now. You'll never regret trying, you'll only regret not trying." Her granddaughter smiled nervously but decided to audition. When she later came back excited about making the cast, Alina felt tears in her eyes. Perhaps the mistakes of the past could still become seeds of wisdom for the future. Not every adventure was glamorous. Sometimes, living more meaningfully meant simply calling an old friend to say hello or cooking her late husband's favorite dish to feel close to him again. It meant walking in the park and really noticing the golden leaves instead of rushing home. It meant writing letters to her daughter, not just about practical matters but about feelings, hopes, and gratitude. One summer, Alina and Margaret finally took a trip together. They didn't travel across the world, but they visited a small coastal town just a few hours away. They walked along the beach, collected seashells, and stayed up late talking under the stars. Alina felt a kind of joy she hadn't felt in years, not because the trip was extraordinary, but because she had finally stopped waiting for life to give her permission to live. In those moments, she realized the most important lesson: regret is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be permanent. We all make choices that leave us wondering what if, but we still have the power to shape our present. Time may not stretch endlessly ahead, but even a single day lived fully can outweigh years of hesitation. As Alina grew older, she carried fewer regrets and more gratitude. She could not undo the past, but she could honor it by living better now. She smiled more often, spoke her feelings more freely, and said, "I love you" without holding back. The guitar by her chair no longer gathered dust, it became her evening companion. Her paintings, though imperfect, lined her hallway walls, each one a reminder that beauty is not about perfection but about courage. One evening, sitting with Margaret after dinner, Alina said, "You know, I used to think regret was my enemy, but now I see it was a teacher all along. It showed me what mattered and it pushed me to finally live." Margaret nodded, her eyes shining with quiet understanding. They didn't need many words. The lesson was clear. While the past could not be rewritten, the present was still theirs to shape. In the end, Aliner's story is not about regret itself but about transformation. It is about learning from the missed chances and deciding that time, however short, is still precious. She discovered that meaning is not found in chasing perfection or avoiding mistakes, but in choosing to live authentically and lovingly while the opportunity remains. And so, as she looked once again out her window at the stars, Eleanor no longer felt only the ache of what was lost. Instead, she felt the warmth of what was still possible. Her regrets had softened into wisdom, and her life, though in its later chapters, was more alive than ever.